She was born in Ethiopia. She went to Yale. She has lived in Iowa, New York, Florida. Now her hometown San Francisco paper calls her an artistic giant in the early stages. Is it any surprise that Meklit Hadero describes her music as something that comes from in-between spaces? Yet Meklit is looking to fill those spaces through cross-cultural conversations in countries that border the Nile River, and in collaboration with Seattle-based artists to create an album like a video game funded through Kickstarter. From technology to TED, how does Meklit expand her horizons and ours while remaining true to her roots? I'm Hanson Hossein. Welcome to Four Peaks. Meklit Hadero, Transmedia artist extraordinaire. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So many people might identify you as a musician, but at the same time, you got all these really interesting projects that actually involve different forms of media. So what is it? More musician or more media artist?
I think it's about telling stories that connect with people and that connect people to each other. And we're in this place in how we relate to one another that the medium ends up connecting you to a different kind of audience. So in order to engage multiple communities, it's important to use different kinds of medium. And so I find that in everything that I do, I consider myself an experimenter, including in the how, as well as in the what it is that you're making.
Well, that's really interesting. So each medium defines the kind of audience you're trying to connect to and kind of community you're trying to build. So for example, when you're looking at your music, can you explain a little bit more about what kind of audience you're connecting to there?
Well, I think that what I'm interested in doing is in connecting to multiple audiences. So there's this kind of relationship that you form when you're singing a song in a room full of people and you've all just had dinner together and had conversations that make the music relevant to a kind of feeling that's in the room. And then there's the way that you can connect when you're in an audience of people in a room where they go specifically to have this experience of sound, a concert, whether it's a club or a theater. And then there's this online relationship, but that has become even more personal, because I get all kinds of, after I release a video or...
Speaking of video, we're showing your most recent video right now.
Do an interview, people write to me and they ask me all kinds of questions, and it becomes a kind of resonator.
Well, that's interesting because you're talking about connection, and as the internet has become more important in our lives, some people have said, online and offline, two different worlds, but it sounds to me that they're actually coming together for you.
I think they are, and I think that's when it can have the most meaning, because it is about having a meaningful relationship to your own world, the world you find yourself in, and to the people that are around you. And so I think when it comes to connection and that search for meaning are very much linked, and I think, that's kind of what artists are doing, right?
Is there a particular meaning that you're searching out for yourself that would really resonate with the essence of you?
Well, I think that what I'm trying to do, as you said in the introduction, is to look at kind of where are we at in this world and how can we relate to each other in ways that allow our greatest humanity to flourish, and how can we be, how do I say this, the most open to addressing the issues that we're all facing together.
And that's exactly what you seem to be doing with one of your more recent projects, like the Nile Project. And I'm just going to bring up a few seconds of that.
Sure.
Where you're using your music, you're using other artists, you're using academics and experts to talk about various issues around the countries that border the Nile River. And you're building community around that. Why is that so important to you? And here's a few seconds of you actually, I think, launching the Kickstarter campaign behind that project as well.
The Nile Project has been a really amazing new adventure, and it's really still in its beginning stages. The project began back in August of 2011, so we recently had our 1-year anniversary. And it's been a year of planning, of thinking through this very large-scale project. It's quite large in its scope. And it began with a conversation between myself and Mina Girgis, an Egyptian ethnomusicologist who is a longtime friend of mine. And we were sitting having a beer after an Ethiopian music concert and talking about talking about the way that, you know, for Mina in Egypt, he had to come all the way to the States to hear the music of his neighbor in Africa. And why was that? Why is it that there are so few avenues for creating cultural relationships in Africa? You would be surprised by that. And when you're in Uganda, you don't hear music from Sudan, and when you're in Sudan, you don't hear music from
I guess,
Tanzania.
very neighborhood-oriented or very local-oriented in those countries.
Yeah.
They don't transcend the borders. And yet, here's an American of Ethiopian descent doing exactly the same thing.
Well, in part, it was because we realized that when you're in diaspora, you have access to communities from all over the world. And not only that, but because we share so many experiences, once we're here, we really, you know, are able to relate to one another at a level that can be challenging on the continent itself. So the project started off as an idea, well, how can we bring the music of the neighbors to the neighborhood? And what is it that we share, and how can we relate to what it is that we share? So that was really the origin of the project.
It seems like, generally speaking, you're able to use technology, whether it's Kickstarter or the internet, to bring these communities together. Just a few seconds left, but just to show your Copper Wire project as well, which is a collaboration with a Seattle-based artist, and where you're trying to bring these communities together through these various platforms. It's platforms, it's ethnicities, it's countries. It's definitely hyphen world here, isn't it?
It is, and I think hyphens allow us to explore the metaphors that make up our lives. And this is also the realm of the arts as metaphor. And Copper Wire was really about using this metaphor of space travel, of intergalactic distances, to talk about what it means to find home, what it means to travel through these distances in yourself, to be able to relate to what is yours and to what is meaningful to you. So Gabriel Teodros is the Seattle-based artist that I collaborated with for Copper Wire, and the third member of Copper Wire is Elias Fulmore, who's aka Burnt Face. And Gabriel is actually also my cousin.
Oh, I didn't realize there was a relationship. You know, we're going to talk about that when we come back, because I want to get deeper into these collaborations and also this notion of diaspora, because it really comes through in what you just explained. So we'll be right back with Meklit Hadero. Well, we're back with Meklit Hadero, a musician, multimedia artist, and community convener. All these different titles, Meklit. We talked about this in the first segment, but you must have an essential brand as well that you're trying to convey to people. So how do you manage all that and keep the essence of that brand out there?
I think it's a big challenge because I'm so drawn to so many different types of storytelling, so many different sonic projects. You know, I grew up listening to hip hop. I grew up in Brooklyn in the 80s, and hip hop is a really big part of who I am. I grew up listening to Michael Jackson and, you know, all of the 80s pop stuff, but also to the Ethiopian music that my parents would play in the car, in the cassettes we would listen to in the car. So I really grew up full of these different sounds that I want to express as an artist. There's so many different parts of me, just as there are so many different parts of everybody, right? Everybody is full of this complexity. So,
but you make a living off your complexity and your art. And so if somebody were to look at, say, the Wikipedia entry for you, or even your website, it's going to say musician, there'll be Copper Wire, the Nile Project, and a few other things as well.
That's right.
Do you feel like it's got a unified feel to it in terms of who you are?
Well, I do feel like the thing that unifies it is me. And so I do try to connect as much as possible directly to my fans, to my audiences, no matter what the project. And the reality is that it is a challenge, and maybe some people like one thing and not another. Maybe they like 2 of my 4 projects, and maybe they are relate to all of them. And I think one of the things I've been doing is really trusting my audiences to move with me through these projects. But I also think it can be confusing, and it is a challenge for me in terms of my communication to really make sure people know that it's me that unites all of them.
Because yeah, there could be that potential of brand confusion, but a few things you said seem to be common themes, like in between spaces, hyphens, even diaspora. This notion of connecting people on the outside where you couldn't necessarily do it on the inside. And you've actually referenced this a few times as well, of being a storyteller, whether it's a storyteller through your music or a storyteller through these projects. If you had to sum up that story in a couple of lines, what is the depth of that story?
We're in this together.
no matter where we are, huh? And we're in this together. Americans, Ethiopians, world is a complete like.
I mean, you know, it's so hard to say these things without sounding like the point is just to all hold hands around, you know, a campfire. But because I think there's ways that you can address, there are ways that you can try to say these things that sound superficial, but it's actually just true. We are in this together. Here we are. This is a very confusing, challenging world that we're in, and how can we move through it if we don't truly communicate with each other? And this is what it's about. It's about finding ways for true communication, and that can mean for the challenges too. It doesn't mean that we're just, you know, holding hands. It means that let's really talk about what we have in common. I think that, you know, but I also don't want to get too involved in the aspect of the work where it's about addressing something, because there is also that simple, pure experience of music.
Well, let me ask you that. So for that pure experience and some of the things you're doing involve technology, especially copper wire, where you're looking to work with these Seattle-based artists and you're looking at doing gaming and everything else. Does the technology enhance that we're all in it together, or does it actually detract from it?
Well, you know, I tend to feel like dichotomies are always just a doorway opening into what the bigger conversation is. And I think that, you know, when it comes to technology, immediately you're going to think about questions of access. And so there are those ways that it can be divisive, but it can also be about engaging the imagination. And copper wire specifically is about writing the future, you know, because we think a lot about our past, and we think a lot about where is it that we come from and how can we bring where we come from into the future, and that's all very, very true. But what we don't do a lot of is imagining the future. What does it look like? What do we want the future to look like?
And so technology cannot be separated from that future.
It cannot be, and it can be a tool for showing us images. For let's test it out. And when you look, it's funny because when you look back on science fiction, it always tells you more about the time that it was written in. And so it's a constant reflection, this back and forth. What does our future look like? What do we want it to look like? And what will that tell us about where we're at right now?
I think that's a highly contextual situation. I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And so Meklit has identified her challenge, and obviously we're looking at potential brand confusion with a very powerful artistic brand. So after the break, we'll help Meklit actually extend her reach. We'll be right back. We are back with Meklit Hadero, a musician and transmedia artist, and we're helping Meklit try to figure out, you know, what is her brand? And I have to ask you, as an artist, do you feel okay with being called a brand? Because I think especially in today's ecosystem, brands are what seem to resonate, and individuals now are brands as much as corporations are. So is that okay if we start with that premise?
Sure, we can totally start with that premise. You know, the thing about the word brand, you know, you're always worried about getting too one-dimensional, but I think if you look at the word brand as being your communication platform, it can be whatever you want it to be.
And you're allied with a very powerful brand because you are a TED fellow, and TED in our circles is a very powerful thing.
Yes.
You know, technology, education, design.
Entertainment,
I get that wrong all the time. And so people associate all these brands with you. I even mentioned Yale University. These are brands that come to you. So if there's the Meklit Hadero brand, you mentioned that you were all in this together. One of the things we do with both organizations and individuals is say, well, if there were to be a narrative mission statement about you, like 3 lines to a paragraph that would sum up who you are, that you could build an entire feature film, like if they had to do the biopic, could we create that action idea about who you are, and then everything you do kind of aligns with that narrative?
That's what I think would be really, is a really essential part of my communication strategy right now. And I'm I'm in the process of redoing my website, and all of this relates back to what that essential message is.
And this comes, some of this comes from Aristotle, who used to say that all good stories have a beginning, middle, and end, and that at its center is this universal action that we can all relate to. So like for, Rocky would be like this boxer doesn't believe in himself, he's trying to convince this woman that he loves that he can actually do it. She convinces him that it's okay, and he rises to the occasion and he overcomes his fears and he becomes champion of the world. That's the essence of Rocky's action idea. Could we do something like that for you?
Well, I think that some middles are swirling concentric circles, it's like, and they're...
Could we choose a middle for you?
Well, I think we are right in the middle.
Okay.
I always loved that. In fact, I always identified with that idea from theater in medias res, to start in the middle, so I think that the middle is the middle is the interesting part. It's the meat of it, but I think that is the sound itself. I think it's sound. I think the heart of the story is a musical one.
Right. So, and we talked about hyphens and in between spaces, which sort of connote middle as well. And middle for Aristotle was very much either tension, transformation, or struggle leading to some kind of resolution, so that the outcome at the end was very different from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So what's your transformation, tension, or struggle right now in your middle?
Oh, I don't know how to answer that question.
Well, that's okay, but because this is what people are actually attracted to. This is why we use storytelling now for communication, because people like that emotional tug, that something is interesting here. This person's in transition, and it's going to be different when the story comes to an end. So I want to stick around to see how this is all going to work out. Mm-hmm. So it's something you're trying to address through all the work that you're doing, and it's maybe that we're all in this together. And so you're trying to bring people together. So that middle might be the struggle of trying to connect people and communicate and use all these platforms. Would that be somewhat accurate?
Well, I just think, the biggest part of the challenge is reconciling this idea that relates to a struggle mm-hmm. with this idea of the kind of that direct experience of the art.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to leave that out of the narrative, because
the direct experience of the art.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that.
And the simple transformational power of experiencing a performance that breaks you open, right? It's not just about the language that we put on that experience. It's about the experience itself.
So how about this then? A community-based artist who works in different planes, platforms, and modalities intends to create community around her work through direct experiences with her art. Does that feel like something you could build an entire platform around?
I like it.
All right, well, that's a rough action idea. It could actually take a few iterations, but to me, as I was looking at who you are and all the wonderful things you do, I think you could so easily be summed up, and that's so necessary now because there's so much confusion and chaos in our communication ecosystem, and you're bringing that direct experience with emotion and artistic endeavor, and I think it's a necessary salve for, I think, the wound that we have in our communication state as it is right now. So I think we got a good start here, and hopefully we can work with it. Exactly. So now hopefully you'll teach me a thing or two. We're going to come back, and I think we're taking out our guitars with Meklit Hadero as she helps me renew my love for music, and we'll have our own direct experience as well. We'll be right back.
4 Peaks is made possible by generous support from Weber Shandwick.
We are back with the amazing Meklit Hadero, and she's going to teach the not-so-amazing me how to play along with one of her songs. And what song are we going to do?
We're going to do a song called Abay Mando, and Abay Mando means from across the Blue Nile. And
what language is this?
It's in Amharic, which is one of the main languages from Ethiopia. And I got obsessed with this song many years ago, and it's the kind of song.
It's a folk song.
It's a folk song.
Oh.
Yes, it's a folk song, and it was made famous by Mahmoud Ahmed, who's one of my favorite singers from Ethiopia. And it's a beautiful classic folk tune.
Oh, great! And when do you choose to actually go Ethiopian with your music as opposed to sort of doing American jazz, pop, that kind of thing?
Well, for me, choosing songs is about what possesses you. And so that song just
does it for you, huh?
It does.
All right, so let's give it a whirl.
Abai mado filo sari alo banana kabere. Abai mado filo sari alo banana kabere. Oh, but yale, but which were harder. We got on copy. I'm at a toes it up. I'm dropping Miss Ra. Like it, but second. Get it at any bed. Get home and all in now. Are you the mom? Are you the mom? Are you the mom? Are you the mom? Meratuna bibo. Lim lim momina yo, ya gavere dikam, yes rawtet no, ya gavere dikam, yes rawtet no. Abai mado fila sari alo banana beri. Abai mado fila sari alo banana na 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 na. Meratun apibo lim lim momina yo ya gabara dikam yesra wutet no akil firafre afkal firafre ya get alinta ara shugabere.
Oh, I want to thank Meklit Hadero, musician, artist, cross-cultural ambassador, for showing me the way, for sharing what she has to share with us, and for bringing us all together. And we invite you all to extend your reach by connecting with us at 4peaks.org. I'm Hanson Hossein, and I'm going to go back to playing with Meklit.
Production of Four Peaks would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors.